The winter sun cast long shadows across the frozen Wyoming landscape as Catherine Sutton stared out her bedroom window, a quilt wrapped tightly around her shoulders doing little to ward off the bone-deep chill that had settled within her since Thomas's death. The Silent Creek Ranch had never felt so vast, so empty, or so unbearably quiet as it had these past 18 months. Catherine sighed, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the snow fall outside. At 26, she hadn't imagined she'd be a widow, managing a struggling cattle ranch alone in the unforgiving Wyoming Territory of 1876. The bed behind her too big for one person remained neatly made, untouched on one side as if preserving the ghost of her husband. A particularly strong gust of wind rattled the window frame, sending a fresh wave of cold air through the cracks. Catherine pulled the quilt tighter and made her way downstairs to stoke the fire. The ranch hands were loyal, but they couldn't replace Thomas. They couldn't keep her company during the long winter nights when memories grew louder than the howling wind. She had just placed another log on the fire when a pounding at the door startled her. Catherine reached for the shotgun that leaned against the wall, a habit born of necessity for a woman alone on the frontier. "Who's there?" she called, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Madam, sorry to trouble you," came a deep, unfamiliar voice. "Name's Ethan Finlay. Got caught in the storm. My horse is injured and I saw your lights." Catherine hesitated, the shotgun still gripped in her hands. Strangers could mean danger, but turning away a man in a blizzard went against everything she'd been taught about frontier hospitality. "I'm armed," she warned, unbolting the door and pulling it open just enough to see the figure on her porch. The man stood tall despite being hunched against the cold, snow covering his broad shoulders and the brim of his well-worn hat. His face, partially illuminated by the lantern she held, revealed kind eyes set in a weather-beaten face. "Wouldn't expect anything less, madam," he replied, respect evident in his tone. "I can sleep in your barn if you'd prefer, just need shelter till morning." Catherine studied him a moment longer. There was something reassuring in his steady gaze, no hint of threat or deception. "Bring your horse to the stable," she decided. "Then come to the house. You look half frozen." Relief washed over his features. "Much obliged, madam." Catherine watched from the doorway as he led his limping horse toward the barn. She noticed how he spoke softly to the animal, his movements gentle despite his own discomfort. 20 minutes later, he returned, stomping snow from his boots before entering her home. In the light of the parlor, she could see him more clearly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, he appeared to be in his early 30s. His clothes were worn but clean, and the gun belt at his hip seemed more a tool than a threat. "Your horse?" she asked, handing him a cup of hot coffee. "Should be fine by morning, just overworked in the deep snow." He wrapped his hands around the cup gratefully. "I appreciate your kindness, Mrs. Sutton, Catherine Sutton, Mrs. Sutton." He nodded respectfully. "You're alone here." Her grip tightened on the shotgun that remained within reach. "I have ranch hands. They're in the bunkhouse." Understanding crossed his face. "I meant no disrespect, just surprised to see a woman managing a ranch of this size alone." "It was my husband's," she said, the words still painful to speak aloud. "He died last year, fever." Ethan Finlay removed his hat, revealing more of his face, handsome in a rugged way, with crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam." Something in his simple, genuine sympathy broke through Catherine's carefully constructed defenses. Tears threatened, and she turned away, busying herself with the fire. "There's stew warming," she said, changing the subject. "You're welcome to some before you rest." They ate in companionable silence, the howling wind outside making the warmth of the kitchen all the more precious. Catherine found herself studying her unexpected guest when he wasn't looking. His hands were calloused, speaking of hard work, and he ate with the grateful efficiency of a man accustomed to going hungry. "Where are you headed, Mr. Finlay?" she asked finally. "North. Got a letter from an old friend in Montana Territory. Says there's work for experienced hands at a new ranch." He paused. "Been drifting since the war ended. Figure it might be time to put down roots somewhere." You fought in the war, he nodded, a shadow crossing his face. Union cavalry, spent 4 years watching good men die. Been wandering ever since. Catherine understood wandering spirits. Thomas had been one always restless, always searching for something just over the horizon. It was why they'd come to Wyoming in the first place. Your ranch hands, Ethan said after a while. They good men. Catherine sighed, setting down her spoon. Loyal to Thomas, they work hard enough, but she trailed off, unsure how to explain. But they don't expect to take orders from a woman, he finished for her, something like that. She met his gaze directly. They think I should sell. Maybe they're right. Is that what you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted since Thomas died. Everyone from the banker in town to her own father back east had simply told her what she should do. No, she admitted. This was our dream, Thomas's and mine. But I'm not sure I can hold on to it alone. Before Ethan could respond, a particularly violent gust rattled the windows and the fire flickered dangerously in the grate. That storm's getting worse, he observed. Might not clear by morning. Catherine nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate the kitchen felt with just the two of them. I'll make up the spare room, she said, rising quickly. That night, Catherine lay awake in her bed, listening to the unfamiliar sound of another person moving about her house. It had been so long since these walls had contained anyone but her. Strangely, instead of fear, she felt a comfort in the presence of the stranger down the hall. Morning brought no relief from the storm. The snow had piled against the house, and when Catherine peered out toward the bunkhouse, she could barely make out its shape through the swirling white. She found Ethan already awake, attempting to build up the fire in the parlor. Looks like I'm imposing on your hospitality another day, he said apologetically. Catherine surprised herself by smiling. Good thing I made extra biscuits yesterday. The day passed with unexpected ease. Ethan insisted on earning his keep, chopping more firewood and helping Catherine tend to the few animals kept close to the house. When they ventured to check on his horse and the main barn, Catherine was impressed by his knowledge and gentle handling of the livestock. You've worked with cattle before, she observed as they returned to the house, fighting against the wind. Most of my life, he confirmed. My father ran a small operation in Colorado before the war, not as grand as this, but I learned the trade young. Inside, as they warmed themselves by the fire, Catherine found herself sharing more about the challenges she faced with the ranch, the broken fences the hands hadn't prioritized fixing. The missing cattle she suspected were being rustled. The struggle to get fair prices at market as a woman on her own. Your men aren't protecting your interests, Ethan observed, his expression thoughtful, whether from laziness or something worse. I've thought the same, she admitted, but what choice do I have? No one in these parts will work for a woman they don't believe should own land to begin with. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I could take a look around when the storm breaks, before I continue north. The offer hung between them, unexpected and tempting. Catherine studied his profile in the firelight, wondering why she felt so inclined to trust this stranger who had appeared on her doorstep. Why would you do that? She asked finally. He turned to her, his expression open. Because someone once did the same for me when I needed it. And because I think you deserve a fair chance at holding on to what's yours. The blizzard lasted 3 days, during which Catherine and Ethan fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. They cooked together, tended the animals, and in the evenings, sat by the fire talking. Catherine learned that Ethan had lost his wife and infant daughter to illness while he was away fighting. The revelation created a new understanding between them. Both knew the particular pain of dreams shattered by death. On the 4th morning, Catherine awoke to sunshine streaming through her window. The storm had finally broken. She dressed quickly and descended the stairs to find Ethan already preparing breakfast. Your men will be able to get out today, he said, nodding toward the window where the bunkhouse was now clearly visible across the yard. Catherine felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. With the storm's end, Ethan would continue his journey north. The thought of returning to her solitary existence felt suddenly unbearable. I should check on them, she said instead of voicing these thoughts. They might be running low on supplies. As she pulled on her coat, Ethan approached, his expression serious. Before your men come up to the house, I'd like to ride the property line if you'll allow it, see if I can spot anything that needs attention. Catherine hesitated only briefly before nodding. Take Daisy from the stable, she knows the trails better than any horse. By midday, Catherine's foreman, Sam Wilson, had made his way to the main house along with 2 other hands. Their surprise at finding Ethan's presence was evident, their suspicion barely concealed. Storm trapped him here, Catherine explained, standing straighter than usual. Mr. Finlay has been helping me with repairs while waiting for the weather to clear. Wilson's eyes narrowed. Mighty convenient, a stranger showing up just as we're cut off from the house. That's enough, Sam, Catherine said firmly. Mr. Finlay has been a perfect gentleman and has done more work in 3 days than I've seen from some in weeks. The criticism wasn't lost on the men, whose expressions darkened. Before tensions could escalate further, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Ethan's return. He dismounted in the yard, his face grim as he approached the group. Mrs. Sutton, I'd like a word if I might, he said, tipping his hat to the ranch hands without warmth. Inside the house, Ethan wasted no time. You've got trouble on your south border. Found signs of cattle being moved across recently, despite the storm, and your line shack down there has been occupied, not by your men from the looks of things. Catherine felt her heart sink. Rustlers? Almost certainly, and I'd wager some of your hands know about it. His eyes were hard. The tracks suggest they've been using that route for months. No way that happens without someone on the inside turning a blind eye. The betrayal stung, though Catherine had suspected as much. What can I do? I can't prove anything. Ethan paced the room, thinking. You need loyal hands, for one thing, and you need to make it clear you won't be pushed off your land. How? Catherine asked, frustration evident in her voice. I'm one woman against men who think I shouldn't be here in the first place. Ethan stopped pacing and faced her directly. What if you weren't alone? Catherine stared at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting I stay on at least through spring, help you get the ranch back in order, find reliable hands. He hesitated. That job in Montana will still be there later if I still want it. The offer left Catherine speechless. Hope, a feeling she'd almost forgotten, blossomed in her chest, but suspicion quickly followed. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Ethan's expression softened. I know enough. I know you're fighting to hold on to something important. I know you've faced loss and kept going. He paused. And I know I haven't felt this alive, this purposeful in years. Catherine took a deep breath, weighing her options. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't often afford, and yet. As foreman, she decided, with fair wages, I won't accept charity, Mr. Finlay. A slow smile spread across his face. Never thought you would, Mrs. Sutton. The announcement of Ethan's new position was met with thinly veiled hostility from Wilson and several of the other hands. Two quit on the spot, which Catherine suspected was for the best. The remaining men watched warily as Ethan began implementing changes, regular patrols of the property lines, repairs to fences too long neglected, a full inventory of the cattle. Within a week, Ethan had hired 3 new hands, young men eager for work and without the prejudices of the older cowboys. They treated Catherine with respect, taking her orders without question. One evening, as Catherine reviewed the account books in the parlor, Ethan reported that they'd caught 2 men attempting to drive a dozen of her cattle across the south border. Your former hand, Johnson, was with them, he said grimly. We've got them tied up in the barn. Sheriff should be here by morning. I sent young Riley to town. Catherine set down her pencil, her hand trembling slightly. Was anyone hurt? Nothing serious. Peters took a blow to the head, but he's sturdy. Ethan hesitated. Catherine. They said Wilson's been letting them take cattle for months, getting a cut of the profits. The betrayal, though expected, still hurt. He worked for Thomas for 3 years. I trusted him. Ethan moved to sit beside her on the settee, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Some men see only what they want to see. Wilson saw a vulnerable widow, not the strong woman you are. His words wrapped around her like a blanket against the cold. When had anyone last seen her strength instead of her circumstances? The arrival of Sheriff Parker the next morning brought a flurry of activity to the ranch. The rustlers were taken into custody, and Wilson, upon being confronted with evidence of his complicity, fled before he could be arrested. "He won't get far," the sheriff assured them. Words already spread to the neighboring ranches to keep an eye out. After the lawman departed with his prisoners, an unusual quiet settled over the ranch. Catherine stood on the porch, watching as Ethan directed the hands in the daily tasks, his commanding presence a stark contrast to Wilson's half-hearted leadership. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting to reveal green shoots pushing through the soil. With each passing day, the ranch flourished under their joint care. Catherine found herself smiling more, laughing even, especially in Ethan's company. They fell into a routine breakfast together each morning, discussing the day's work, dinner each evening, sharing the events that had transpired. Sometimes they'd sit on the porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors. It was during one such evening, with the first truly warm breeze of the season brushing against their faces, that Catherine realized how profoundly her life had changed since Ethan's arrival. The cold emptiness that had defined her existence had been replaced by purpose, hope, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. "Penny for your thoughts," Ethan said, his voice gentle in the gathering dusk. Catherine turned to look at him, noticing how the fading light softened his features. "I was thinking about how different everything is now. The ranch, my life." She paused. "Me," his eyes, warm and attentive, held hers. "Different in a good way, I hope." "Yes," she admitted. "Though sometimes I feel guilty for it, for being happy when Thomas is gone." Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "After Sarah and the baby died, I felt that guilt too, like every moment I wasn't suffering was a betrayal." His hand found hers on the porch railing, his touch cautious but steady. "Took me years to realize that living fully is the best way to honor those we've lost." The warmth of his hand against hers sent a flutter through Catherine's chest. "When did you stop feeling like a ghost yourself?" She asked softly. His smile was gentle, almost shy. "Honestly, when a stubborn widow let me in from a blizzard and reminded me what it felt like to have purpose again." Catherine's heart raced as understanding bloomed between them. The connection they'd forged over these months was transforming into something deeper, something neither had expected to find again. Before she could respond, hoofbeats approached rapidly, breaking the moment. One of the hands, young Riley, galloped into the yard. "Mr. Finlay, Mrs. Sutton." He called urgently. "Riders coming. Looks like Wilson with a group of men." Ethan was on his feet instantly, his expression hardening. "Get inside, Catherine. Tell Peters to bring the rifles from the gun cabinet." The peaceful evening shattered as Catherine hurried to follow his instructions. Through the window, she watched Ethan gathering the hands, positioning them strategically around the main house and barn. 6 riders appeared at the edge of the property just as dusk deepened into true darkness. Catherine recognized Wilson at the front, his face visible in the lantern light as they approached. "Come out, Finlay," Wilson shouted. "You've got no right to this land." Ethan stood firm on the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. "You're trespassing, Wilson. The lady of this ranch made it clear you're not welcome here." Wilson's laugh was ugly in the gathering darkness. "Lady of the ranch, she's nothing but a woman who doesn't know her place. This land needs a man's hand." "And it has one," Ethan replied calmly. "Several, in fact. Loyal men who respect Mrs. Sutton's ownership." Catherine moved to the door, opening it despite Ethan's warning glance. She stepped onto the porch beside him, her own rifle steady in her hands. "This is my land, Sam," she called out clearly. "Legally and rightfully. You betrayed my trust and my husband's memory when you helped those rustlers." Wilson spat on the ground. "Your husband would be ashamed to see you taking up with another man so quick. Everyone in the county's talking about it, the widow and her drifter." The accusation stung, but Catherine held her ground. "What Thomas would be ashamed of is how you've used his death to steal from his wife. Now get off my property before I have these men remove you." For a tense moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Wilson and his companions outnumbered Ethan and the hands, but the defenders had the advantage of position. Then, from the road behind Wilson's group, more riders appeared, Sheriff Parker and a posse of men from town. "That's far enough, Wilson," the sheriff called. "I've got a warrant for your arrest. Best come quiet." The confrontation ended with surprising swiftness after that. Wilson, seeing himself outmaneuvered, surrendered with bitter curses. His companions, most of them hired guns with no personal stake in the conflict, quickly abandoned him. As the sheriff led the prisoners away, Catherine felt her legs grow weak with the release of tension. Ethan was beside her instantly, his arm strong around her waist. "You were magnificent," he murmured, guiding her back into the house away from the curious eyes of the hands. Inside, with the door closed against the night, Catherine turned in his embrace. "I was terrified," she admitted, "not of Wilson, but of losing this, the ranch. You." Ethan's hands framed her face gently, his eyes searching hers. "Catherine Sutton, you are the strongest, most determined woman I have ever known. You won't lose anything you set your mind to keeping." "Including you," she whispered, allowing herself to voice the fear that had grown alongside her feelings for him, "especially me." His voice was rough with emotion. "If you want me to stay, wild horses couldn't drag me from your side." The kiss that followed was gentle, at first a question, an offering before deepening into something that spoke of need long denied, of hearts recognizing their match. When they finally parted, breathless, Catherine felt as though something frozen within her had finally thawed completely. "Stay," she said simply. "Not as my foreman, not as my hired hand. Stay as your partner," Ethan finished, his smile illuminating his entire face. "In all things." That night, for the first time since Thomas's death, Catherine's bed was no longer a monument to what she had lost. Instead, in Ethan's embrace, it became a promise of what she had found: warmth, passion, and the courage to build something new. Summer came to Wyoming in a riot of wildflowers and endless blue skies. The Silent Creek Ranch flourished under their joint care. The cattle grew fat on rich grass, new calves strengthened the herd, and the once struggling operation began to show a profit. On a perfect July morning, with the mountains sharp against the horizon, Catherine and Ethan were married on the porch of the ranch house. Sheriff Parker, who had become a friend and ally, performed the ceremony while the ranch hands and neighbors from miles around witnessed their vows. Catherine wore a simple blue dress rather than widow's black, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Ethan preferred it. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, a band he'd saved for months to buy, she felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you," Ethan vowed, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "To share your burdens and your joys, to build our dream together for all the days we're granted." Catherine's own vows, spoken through happy tears, echoed his sentiments. "I promise to face each day with you as equal partners, to never take for granted the gift of finding love twice in one lifetime, to fill our home with warmth and laughter for all our days." That evening, after the celebrations had ended and the last guest had departed, they stood together on the porch, watching the sunset just as they had on so many evenings before. "Mrs. Finlay," Ethan said, testing the name with evident pleasure, "how does it feel?" Catherine leaned into his embrace, savoring the strength and warmth of him. "It feels like coming home after a long journey," she replied truthfully, "like finding something I didn't know I was missing." His kiss was tender, full of promise. When they finally separated, Ethan took her hand and led her toward the house, their house now, truly shared. "You know," he said as they crossed the threshold, "I was thinking about expanding the east pasture. That land would support another 100 head at least." Catherine smiled, recognizing his words for what they were: not just plans for the ranch, but plans for their future together. "And the old line shack could be rebuilt as a proper cabin," she added, "for when we want to check on the herd in the high meadow." They continued this way, trading ideas and dreams as they moved through the house, extinguishing lamps as they went. By the time they reached their bedroom, the only light came from the moon streaming through the window. Catherine paused in the doorway, suddenly overwhelmed by how much had changed in the months since a blizzard had brought Ethan to her door. The room that had once felt like a mausoleum to her grief now pulsed with life and possibility. Ethan seemed to read her thoughts. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive," he said softly. "I plan to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am for it." As Catherine moved into his embrace, she thought about the cold, empty bed that had once symbolized all she had lost. Now, in Ethan's arms, it had become something else entirely, a sanctuary, a beginning, a promise of forever. "I love you, Ethan Finlay," she whispered against his lips. His answering smile contained all the warmth of the sun. "And I love you, Catherine Finlay, today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come." In the years that followed, the Silent Creek Ranch became known throughout the territory for its fine cattle, fair business practices, and the exemplary partnership of the couple who ran it. They faced challenges, droughts, and harsh winters, competing ranchers and changing markets, but they faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. And on cold Wyoming nights, when snow piled against the windows and the wind howled across the plains, Catherine Finlay would lie in her husband's embrace, marveling at how completely warmth had replaced the chill in her heart, how thoroughly love had banished the emptiness she had once thought permanent. In Ethan's arms, she had found not just passion and companionship, but a true partnership that would sustain them through all seasons of their lives. The widow who had once been cold now radiated warmth, secure in the knowledge that her once empty bed and her once empty life had been filled with a love meant to last forever.